Greetings, digital world, and welcome back to another episode of Spliced In Later. First off, I gotta get off bat. Apologies in advance. I have a gremlin in my throat. He is camped out there for the day. So if my voice gives out every now and then during this episode, if I have to clear my throat, or I just keel over and die, that's totally normal. So just be prepared for that, because I can hear it talking to you now. I sound a little bit like Kermit the Frog, which is just wonderful. And the best thing one can do when one's losing its voice is not do a nice simple short episode, but we are going to do another top 10 ranking, as I believe it's been quite some time since we did the last one. Definitely before the last couple of lockdowns have hit where I live. Definitely before the last couple of movie reviews I managed to do back in the past were. So why not? And looking at my track record for where we're up to, we are going to go back to another year and do the top 10 movies of that year. Specifically, we today will be talking about the top 10 movies of 2013. Now, I'm excited to do this one. I think this will be a nice list. I think it will be a good list. There were some good movies that came out in 2013. There are some movies that I considered great that aren't on my list at all, because this is, as we say in front of every ranking, this is a personal preference list. What's on my list probably will not be the same as yours. There will be movies that are higher or lower. There will be movies you've never even heard of, or movies that you hate that are on here. And the same would be the same for all of you out there if you make your own list. So as always, with these episodes, I encourage everybody not to get mad or upset or anything like that, because why bother? That's just a waste of your time. Instead, go look up the lists of films from 2013. It's easy to find. They're on Wikipedia. They're on Box Office Mojo. They're everywhere. Look at the movies that came out and make your own ranking. And then hopefully during that, you'll go back and rewatch some of these films, because they remind you of how much you liked them and enjoyed them. 2013 was a good year for me going to the movies. It was when I was really starting to kick off going to see all sorts of movies, and not just hearing about through hearsay that movies had come out or were good. This was when I started tracking movies. So I saw a lot this year. And even after 2013, I've seen more movies since then from that year that have really impacted how this list looks. So enough dilly-dallying, because these episodes run long enough as it is. We are going today to start ranking our top 10, well, spliced in laters, not ours, mine, top 10 movies of 2013. Here we go. So, coming in at number 10 is 12 Years a Slave. There was a time where this would have been a lot higher on my list, but when compacting this list together, it's not just whether a movie was good, it's also if I enjoyed the movie for specific reasons, and if I want to rewatch the movie. And while 12 Years a Slave is an extremely important film, a very relevant film, a very powerful film, a very well done film, it's not a fun watch by design. Nobody wakes up on a nice sunny Sunday morning and goes, you know what I feel like watching today? 12 Years a Slave. It's the same for stuff like Schindler's List or The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, all those movies which have a very, very intense subject that they're talking about, and they don't hide away from it. They don't shy from how messed up this is. But that being said, 12 Years a Slave is an incredible, impressive, very emotionally stirring film, which is why it absolutely has to be on this list one way or another. Basic point, it tells the story of Solomon Northup, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, who, through no fault of his own, finds himself forced into slavery in the South. I'm going to say right off the bat here, I don't know how slavery laws in America and all that stuff worked in the past, but I got the gist of it from watching this movie, that basically where he ended up was the pinnacle of slavery. And he gets passed around for owners that are either nice enough but still know what they're doing is wrong, or just terrible people, aka Michael Fassbender. Solomon has a family, so by any means necessary, he wants to get back to them. But as it says, it takes 12 years, and he fluctuates from hope to despair to brutal horror. It's a very intense film to watch, because for the most part, it is depressing. At no way do they give you the idea that Solomon's going to get out of his situation. You are despair for every sort of situation that he's in. He is brutally hurt, both physically and emotionally, as well as the people around him. And it really opens your eyes to the horror that humanity is, and especially was during that time, and how they could treat their fellow men. Solomon, portrayed by Chiwetel Ejiofor, it's an incredible performance. He does extremely well. Michael Fassbender is absolutely disgusting to watch, but he plays his role to perfection because of that. And there's some violent, upsetting stuff in here that really makes your skin crawl and your head turn away. But it's also an important story to tell because it is based on a true story, and Solomon's story, for better or for worse, needs to be told. It's just not one of those movies that's going to make you go away and go, well, he went through some stuff, but a happy ending for him then. No. It's important. It's impressive visuals, the way it's directed, the way it's shot, the way it gets everything out in the open for what it's talking about is truly, truly impressive to watch, and it sticks with you. If you haven't seen 12 Years a Slave, I highly recommend you do. As I say, once you see it, you may never want to see it again, but it is important that you do see it. There's a great bunch of actors in here besides Chiwetel Ejiofor and Michael Fassbender. Lupita Nyong'o made a real name for herself in this one as a very, very tortured slave in here. Even Brad Pitt shows up in here for a second, though absolutely it is a self-indulgent part that does pull you out of the film seeing him there, because you go, oh, it's Brad Pitt. What's he doing there? Did he get a time machine? What's happening with that? But impressive stuff all around. It has to be on this list just in terms of rewatchability. I only want to watch this film maybe once a year, and even then I have to be in the right emotional mindset for it, and that's not always the case. But nevertheless, impressive movie, well done by Chiwetel Ejiofor, has to be on this list at number 10. Let's move on to a more light-hearted approach. For number 9 is The World's End, directed by Edgar Wright and starring Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and more or less the end of the Cornetto trilogy, basically a series of films Edgar Wright directed that starred the comedic duo of Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Very different movies, very different topics, but same sense of humor and a same approach to issues in life and all of that stuff as well, or addressing tropes in movies. This last one is probably considered to be the weakest, but for me, it's probably my second favorite, depending on the mood I'm in. All three fluctuate, I think. If you want a proper look into the Cornetto trilogy itself as a whole, I've done an episode on that, basically focusing more on Shaun of the Dead, but also the movies, the trilogy as a whole. That episode is around somewhere. But specifically for The World's End, basically it is a movie where Simon Pegg, now a drunk has-been, but desperate for the glory years of his youth when he used to run around town with his mates and cause trouble before he had to accept that life is a thing that has to happen. He brings his gang of 4 friends back together, so 5 in total, who are all in very different places and all don't really talk or get along much anymore. In a unique respect, Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are at odds with each other in this film instead of best buddies. And they go back to their hometown to complete the Golden Mile, which is to do 12 pub crawl, a pint in each one, culminating in the final pub at the World's End. Obviously, it starts off normally enough. They try and do their thing, and they have to deal with being a bunch of old men who don't get along trying to do this thing. But in true Edgar Wright fashion, something is not right, and eventually they discover that the town they're in has been taken over by alien doppelgangers. And what should they do? Well, we've got to make sure they don't know we know we're onto them, so we got to keep doing the Golden Mile. We got to get to the World's End. It is very funny, and it makes you laugh a lot, but what really rings true for me for this movie is that it kind of speaks to me a lot in terms of recapturing your youth. I'm one of those people who's just like Simon Pegg. I'm very guilty of trying to recapture the feeling that one had when one was younger. So I'm always that guy that's like, we need to go back and do this again because it was good. I would rather do a pub crawl with a couple of mates than go to a baby shower sort of thing, which says a lot about me as a person as well, but we don't have time to analyze that right now. But it's because of that concept, and I see a lot of my friends that I have in Simon Pegg's friends in this film as well. So it's very much like I laugh a lot watching it, and then I also go, oh yeah, I understand what you're going through, Simon Pegg. I get it. There's a good supporting cast here as well. Martin Freeman, Pierce Brosnan, Eddie Marsan, Rosamund Pike. There's some wonderful moments at each pub they go to when the situation gets more and more out of hand until a very over-the-top, crazy ending, which is completely usual for an Edgar Wright film. Also extremely bizarre in such a way that I probably wouldn't show this film to my mother or any other of my family members because they don't get this type of humor, and the movie ends with you going, all right, well, that's that. But whereas 12 Years a Slave is very good and impressive for its subject content, The World's End is just pure fun. It's a very silly movie, but it speaks to me because of the subject content and the characters it's portraying, specifically Simon Pegg. Makes you laugh. It's wonderfully directed in a way that only Edgar Wright can, and it lands solidly here on this list at number 9. Alright, moving on to number 8, we have Gangster Squad. Gangster Squad might not be on a lot of people's lists. I don't know how people feel about it generally as a whole, but this movie is definitely my kryptonite in terms of subject matter, because another one of my favorite movie tropes or movie themes or storylines is gangsters, mafia films that take place in the 1940s or 50s, and that era after World War II ended, where pretty much New York or Los Angeles, all these places were all being run by gangsters who took hold of that power vacuum and everything that was going on through the instability of the world. And the way that they operated is it really depends which sort of gangster you're looking into. The way Al Capone operates is very different to the way Mickey Cohen operates. Now, I really love the game L.A. Noire, which is a great PlayStation 3 or 4 game. If you have not played it, give it a go. It's a lot of fun, very Red Dead Redemption style. But one of the gangsters in there is Mickey Cohen, and he shows up very briefly, but that game told me, okay, so that gangster was a real gangster and was alive in LA during this point. And then it's almost like this movie was made as a direct response to that. Now, it has a bit of bad rep. Unfortunately, this is the movie where the trailer was showing with that unfortunate shooting incident for The Dark Knight Rises, which I don't know if that's helped to just push the film out of the way, because its release was streamlined and then blocked and then moved about a bit to a point where I didn't catch it in the cinemas, even though I really wanted to see it, because it just sort of vanished, maybe because of this air above it. But basically, it's a great film where in Los Angeles, Mickey Cohen is running the streets. He can get away with anything. The cops can't touch him. So the police chief gets Josh Brolin. He says, go get 4 or 5 cops. Go crazy. You hand in your badge. Here's a gun. Do what you need to do to bring him down. Law, schmore, whatever. This guy's got to stop. So Josh Brolin, he gets Ryan Gosling, he gets Anthony Mackie, Giovanni Ribisi, a few people, and they just wage war against Mickey Cohen for the majority of the film. There's also a lovely little love story between Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, which really established them again in La La Land, because they just had some great romantic chemistry between the two. There's not too much to be said about Gangster Squad. It is exactly what I want it to be and what it is. It's a big mafia-style movie. Everyone's wearing those big hats and they're carrying around those Tommy guns, rolling up to each other in those big cars. There's lots of guns and shootouts. But there's also a genuine heart to the story in terms of the Gangster Squad, the group that Josh Brolin brings together, eventually rely on each other as brothers. And this war that they have against Cohen is so personal to a lot of them. And Sean Penn's portrayal of Mickey Cohen is just violent and horrifying to a point where you know straight away this isn't one of those classy gangsters where you might go, oh, okay, yeah, maybe he's all right. He's vicious, he's violent, he's unpredictable, and he needs to be stopped by any means necessary. It's a nice short film too. It's not too long. It tells you straight away what the point is, and then it gets to the point. It looks incredible. It really looks like you're looking into the world of 1945, 46, 50, whenever this movie came out. When the movie plot line was. But great fun, great action, great themes. Looks wonderful too. Great characters in here. Wonderful portrayals from Josh Brolin, Ryan Gosling, and Emma Stone and Sean Penn. It's a guilty pleasure film of mine by absolutely every mean, which is why it's on this list at number 8. At number 7, you knew a movie like this would have to show up here at some point. It's our first Marvel movie for the list, but only one of 2, so you know. But it is Iron Man 3. Now, this is an interesting point for Iron Man 3. Iron Man had his trilogy before the Avengers really even took off. The Avengers came out the year before it. We hadn't established Guardians, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, all of them. So it's at a time where there were very few characters in the MCU, and the stories they were telling were still more specifically focused on the personal stories. Iron Man, of course, kicked off the MCU. It was an incredible film. Iron Man 2, not so much, fell over itself a bit trying to establish a Marvel Cinematic Universe. Iron Man 3 is the first film that not only has to continue the trilogy of Iron Man, but also have fallout from whatever had happened in the MCU right before it, specifically Avengers, the Battle of New York. Directed by Shane Black, it finds Tony suffering from post-traumatic stress from having to go through the whole thing of fighting the Chitauri and going through a wormhole and seeing aliens, to a point where he buries himself in his work and he just keeps banking more and more suits. He then goes through a bit of a personal struggle. Again, in a MCU fashion, the villain is sort of an evil version of the person you're following. Pearce's Aldrich Killian, who has his own company, also likes Pepper, is very jealous of Tony in a way that Justin Hammer was, but a lot more vicious in his approach. Meanwhile, at the same time, you've got the Mandarin, played by Ben Kingsley, who is this terrorist warlord who's threatening the president, threatening to topple the American government through chaos. He also gets wrapped up in trying to take on Tony Stark for one reason or another, to a point where Tony ends up in the film completely cut off. He doesn't have his suits, he doesn't have his friends, he's got a little kid, he's got to hang out in his garage, and he's just got to try and figure out what his next move is. I love the movie specifically for the personal struggle of Tony. I think it is a very underappreciated film because it's overshadowed by a twist, which I'll just mention in a little bit later. But Robert Downey Jr., he's great as Tony, and there's a finality to his portrayal in here where he's world-weary and knows that there's problems he's got to deal with his stress and trauma, where if we never saw Iron Man again after this, it will be a fine enough conclusion to his character. The world that they operate in, the side characters all get their bits to do. Pepper, Rhodey, Happy. Guy Pearce's Killian is interesting. He's definitely hammy when he chews the scenery. But what's great about this film for me, again, is a personal thing. It's directed by Shane Black. I love Shane Black as a director. He does a ton of buddy cop style movies that I absolutely love. The Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, The Nice Guys. He puts his whole style into this film. The buddy cop stuff even comes through when Tony and Rhodey have to team up to save people from a certain thing. But it's this non-linear sense of storytelling, the narration where Tony is essentially telling you the movie through narration. The storyline whips back and forth and between different perspectives, so you get different information depending on who's telling the story or what point of view you're seeing it from. Now, the elephant in the room. There is a twist in this movie that the Mandarin does not end up being what he is in the comics, and is a whole other thing. Depending on how you feel about the Mandarin, you're either going to like the twist or hate it, and it may ruin the movie for you as a concept. I will talk more about it when I eventually get to analyze Iron Man 3 in general in my MCU series of episodes, but suffice it to say, I think it's great. What's great about this sort of approach is that, yes, we are adapting characters from comic books, but if we just adapt them straight for straight, beat for beat, what they are, and don't inject any sort of creativity into them, the whole thing gets very boring very quickly. Everyone's like, Tony needs to do this because he did this in the comics. The Mandarin needs to do this because he does this in the comics, and this is how he is. But by taking this twist for the Mandarin and turning it on its head, not only did it throw us in a completely different direction, I expected him to be one thing, he turned out to be another. It completely changed the whole course and feel of the movie and what I was perceiving. And I personally loved it. I thought it was a great jolt. I thought it livened up the story and the characters in a very certain way. And I know other people who saw that and went, this is bullshit. Even Marvel itself has had to do a course correction because it can't embrace what it did, because it's had to put the Mandarin coming up in, or not coming up, what came out. Jeez, time's going fast for that Shang-Chi movie. But if you can get past that, and I think a majority of you can, because as much as there is a Mandarin fan base, I don't think it's a gigantic fan base. The twist is great. It livens up the story to an already exciting, fast-paced buddy cop, action-style, Shane Black-directed film with Robert Downey Jr. once again killing it as Tony Stark. Cementing it here on my list at number 7. Now coming in at number 6, our other Marvel film, The Wolverine, directed by James Mangold. And I'm not talking about the other Wolverine film called Logan, directed by James Mangold. This is a completely different film, just in case you're confused. After the disaster of X-Men Origins Wolverine in terms of critical reception, bad, what they did to Deadpool, the whole CGI blunder of the claws, it was a disaster of a film. It was pretty impressive that they still pressed on with going, no, we need to make movies about Wolverine. But they course corrected with this one. They adapted a storyline from the comics that Wolverine is very famous for, with his trips to Japan and his confrontations with the Silver Samurai. And they made the movie a much more personal thing. Where X-Men Origins failed was trying to establish all these different characters and trying to build bigger and better from the other X-Men's films. People are going to a Wolverine film because they want to see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Because for better or worse, whatever you think about the X-Men franchise, Hugh Jackman is absolutely solid as Logan, aka Wolverine. The way he sinks himself into his portrayal of this very tortured, battered soul that has been living for so long, that has had to deal with so much trauma and darkness, can get hurt in a variety of ways and still has to keep going, is one of the greatest characters in film. I will stand on my hill to say that for sure. So this film it takes place after the X-Men films instead of before it. Wolverine has gone to Japan. Well, he hasn't gone to Japan yet, but he is on his own because he's dealing with the death of Jean Grey and all that stuff. He gets summoned back to Japan because someone he rescued back in World War II is dying and wants to see him before he dies. He gets whisked away to the Yashida household with a variety of different members who are either welcoming to him or standoffish or downright venomous. While he's there, he's lost his powers. He cannot heal anymore. He can be hurt. So while he's trying to figure out how this happened to him, there's the daughter of the woman that he went to see is kidnapped by Yakuza members, so he has to go and try and stop them. Taking away that force field around Wolverine, which is that he cannot be hurt and cannot be stopped, adds new layers to a character because there's a sense of fear and standoffishness and worry that was not there before. Because you see it in Logan on here. He is both shocked that he cannot heal and also slightly intrigued because if he can't heal, maybe he can finally die. But he's looking around him as well, seeing the things that are going on. He gets pushed along a lot by what he does want of his life, who he considers friends, family, what his purpose is in life. Does he have things left unsaid or unfinished? And through it all, Hugh Jackman has this very tortured portrayal of it, which is just great. The only issue with the Wolverine is that towards the end of the film, it does collapse into the standard superhero bog of, there's the big bad guy I've got to stop. We've got to have a big final set piece action fight. Whereas what I really liked about this film was the character drama and development of Wolverine and seeing him vulnerable and going through all that stuff. The action does look great. I like that he's in Japan because he's separated from the rest of the X-Men. He is firmly Wolverine on his own. It's not Wolverine and the X-Men, Wolverine and X-Force, Wolverine and Gambit. It is Wolverine having to do things by himself with no help. And he proves that he can do it. He is a solid hero in his own right. Even if he doesn't think he is one. I think it deserves more recognition than it gets. It's a nice test run before both James Mangold and Hugh Jackman came back for that wonderful film that is Logan, which is the Old Man Logan storyline, which is R-rated, violent, brutal, but the character development that you get a taste of in this film that they don't quite build on to full effectiveness. So for that alone makes it a great film, but also it's just a great time. It's a fun watch. It's well directed, well acted, good action. Hugh Jackman kills it once again as Wolverine always. It's definitely top tier for my X-Men films and definitely on this list here at number 6. Number 5 is a wonderful film directed by Guillermo del Toro called Pacific Rim. I think Pacific Rim was a bit of a sleeper hit. People sort of saw it and went, it's giant robots fighting. Okay, no worries. We'll catch that when we see it. I know for one that I really only went to see it because when my friend sold me on it, he said, you like the Power Rangers, the Zords, they fight. This is like the Zords, but it's just no Power Rangers. It's like, okay, I'll see it. 1 for that, and 2, Charlie Day's in it. And Charlie Day is one of my favorite comedians. I love him in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I wanted to see him in the film. But surprisingly, it was a very intense, exciting, action-packed film. It's where it does fall down in terms of character development for our main lead. I'm not a huge Charlie Hunnam fan when he's not doing the Guy Ritchie stuff, and I didn't really connect with him much in this film. But aside from him, Marco Mori, Stacco Pentecost, Charlie Day and Bern Gorman together as the scientist duo, it is a very interesting world that they set up where these kaiju creatures are coming through a dimensional rip in the Pacific. So they have to build these giant robots which have to fight them. But in order to pilot the robots, you have to be drift compatible with them to pilot them. And robots always need 2 pilots to sync up half your brain. There's a whole technical jargon. So Charlie Hunnam gets paired up with Marco, who is a the daughter of the Admiral leading the resistance against these monsters. She is the classic, I can do good, but no one believes that I have the capability to pilot these robots and save the day and all of that. It looks incredible because Guillermo del Toro, he is a fantastic director and he knows how to present visuals. It's action when the robots actually get out there and start fighting the kaiju. It is a rock'em sock'em robots wonder thing that takes full advantage of its surroundings. If they're fighting in Tokyo, they take on the neon lights behind them. If they're fighting at the bottom of the Pacific, they take the flashes from the dimensional rip to light things up. The characters feel real. They feel like people that actually in our real world would have to deal with this sort of situation. No one's over the top. I'm this guy. No, these are just regular human beings who have had to band together to do something to stop their world from being trampled. It is a film that sets up a very hopeless situation, but there's always that sense of hope that they just keep fighting to the next thing. As I said, I went to see Charlie Day. He was great in it. I loved his comedic duo with Bern Gorman. I loved Idris Elba leading the charge with his rallying speeches and all of that. And I loved when the robots were punching the hell out of the monsters. It's simple stuff, but I love it. The less said about the terrible sequel Uprising, the better. But Pacific Rim itself, fantastic movie, surprise hit for me and for people in general, I think. Sitting on the list here at number 5. All right, we're getting into the good stuff here. At number 4, we have The Wolf of Wall Street, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Leonardo DiCaprio. I've said it in the past, Martin Scorsese needs to not bother about trashing Marvel movies, but you have to hand it to the man. He is one of those select few directors who just knows how to make a movie. You see a movie directed by Martin Scorsese, you know it's going to look great, it's going to be entertaining, it's going to be gripping in terms of what it is you're watching. You may laugh, you may cry, you may be mesmerized, but you will see art form in film when you watch a Martin Scorsese film. In the same way, when you watch a Denis Villeneuve film, a Steven Spielberg film, a Quentin Tarantino film, there's just these directors that have their specific thumbprint on their products and their movies, which are usually 100% entertaining through reputation alone before you even get to the film itself and realize, yes, of course, I was right. The Wolf of Wall Street is a very long movie, but it doesn't feel long because of the incredible dialogue and wonderful acting here. It is based on a true story. DiCaprio plays of a guy called Jordan Belfort, who basically wrangled his way through Wall Street to steal a ton of money from a lot of different people to fund his own empire and become top dog, essentially, with his very loyal workers that followed him, including Jonah Hill. But in this world, it's pretty extreme in terms of what they get up to with the drug use and the prostitution and the way they swindle people out of their money and betray one another. But at the same time, even though what you're watching is absolutely horrible and they took advantage of poor people to do what they're doing, you can't help but enjoy what you're watching, enjoy their escapades. The way they talk to each other or hold a scene with their dialogue is truly gripping. When Jordan Belfort is going to quit, but then he doesn't quit, that whole speech from DiCaprio is just, you cannot take your eyes off the screen watching him, which again is a credit to how great of an actor DiCaprio is himself. Whether you love him or hate him, when he takes on a role, he throws himself into it in such a way. Some would say that when he's in The Revenant, the fact he fought a bear and lay in the snow is his greatest work. But for me, it's taking a sick, terrible, nasty piece of work like Jordan Belfort and make him fun and interesting to watch to a point where you go, maybe I'd like to hang out with this guy, is impressive in and of itself. Again, it's the direction as well. Every scene is important. Everything that happens is relevant. A wide variety of actors are in here playing different roles, and they're all very memorable. Jonah Hill throws himself into his lackey. Margot Robbie shows up in here in her first real big film role, and then everything just took off for her from then. It is definitely worth watching if you love Scorsese films and if you love film in general. It is a wonderful time. You will have fun watching it. You will feel for Jordan, but you also will not feel bad for him when, of course, he eventually will get his comeuppance at the end of the film. But it's a fun time for sure. I remember I saw it in the movie theaters by myself because everyone had already seen it, and they kept telling me, you got to see this film. This film is great. And I remember going, I need to pee. I've been in this theater for 2.5 to 3 hours. I drank a big thing of Coca-Cola and I need to pee, but I feel like if I step out for even a second, I'm going to miss an important scene or just the joy of seeing a good scene. So I had to sit on it until eventually the film ended and I was able to relieve myself. But no regrets, because The Wolf of Wall Street, incredible film, well directed, well acted, wonderful dialogue that keeps you gripped to the film despite how long it is, and deserving of its spot here at number 4. And at number 3, a nice, simple, sweet little film. It's called Her, directed by Spike Jonze and starring Joaquin Phoenix. Now, say what you will about Joaquin Phoenix, whether you love him or hate him, whether you appreciate his attitude or condemn it, or you just see him stumbling through Hollywood and not really know what to make of it, or he'll present an award at the Academy and just could not give two shits. So he'll present a speech and you're like, you're telling us we shouldn't drink milk? I don't understand you, Joaquin Phoenix. The guy itself is an incredible character actor, and when he gets these roles where he's the main character, but it's not a big bombastic thing, it's just the study of a man's psyche or ideology or anything like that, he absolutely knocks it out of the park. Say what you will about the movie Joker, he's great in it as Arthur Fleck. Her is a very interesting film. It's set in a possible future, far enough away for technology that we don't have it yet, but close enough that we could get there very soon. He is a very lonely man. He just got out of a bad relationship, doesn't have much going on, he doesn't do anything, he doesn't go anywhere. It's very sad. But in this world with technology, he is able to get hold of a computer AI system, which he can program with a voice and a personality. So he does put Scarlett Johansson's voice on there. And what eventually unfolds is a love story between the two. It starts off as just a lonely man just finding a connection with someone who talks with him and understands his view and world and his humor and all of that stuff. But it evolves because the AI itself evolves. Scarlett Johansson, she's evolving through her engagement with Joaquin Phoenix to a point where it starts off as sort of is this a romantic thing? I don't know if I'm okay with this too. No, this is sweet in its own way, to eventually a more, not tragic, but unavoidable situation when the AI starts to think for itself, and then Scarlett Johansson wants to go out and speak to other people and see the world and see what they're capable of. But Joaquin Phoenix's character, despite being able to engage with someone new, he's still stuck in his ways, and he doesn't have that confidence to go out into the world and talk to regular people. It's why he hired a friggin' AI to be his best friend. So it's sweet and charming and romantic in that aspect, and then it really makes you think as well about what we as a society are, how we engage with people. I myself, I can speak to people if I know them, but I struggle very much to introduce myself to new people. So it's very easy to see yourself as ending up like Joaquin Phoenix's character. At the end of the day, it's very well directed as well, because a lot of the scenes is just Joaquin Phoenix sitting in a room talking to a disembodied voice, but you feel like it's real. You don't go, okay, so she's sitting in a recording booth somewhere recording her lies. The way that these two talk back and forth to each other is very believable, it's emotional, and you believe it 100%, to the point that when it gets to its tragic enough ending, but also optimistic, because Joaquin Phoenix eventually will grow as a character, because this is what this movie is about. You do feel good about what you've seen. There are some other actors in here as well. Amy Adams is there as sort of could be Joaquin Phoenix's girlfriend, but also friend. There's just that issue of just not being able to engage with people outside of his own head and his own insecurities. But at the end of the day, it's the Joaquin Phoenix show, and he proves that he is an incredible actor, especially with these character development, character analyses, movies that he's in. It sticks with you, it makes you think, it makes you feel good, it makes you feel bad, it makes you feel all the feels. I love Her. I love it here at number 3. Right, at number 2 is a very specific pick for me and for my interests. I've chosen Saving Mr. Banks. I think most people appreciate Saving Mr. Banks. It is a very good film. It's not a spectacular film. It's not going to change people's way they view cinema or film or whatever. But in terms of the subject matter and what it's about, it's very relevant to me. And I think it's relevant to a lot of people. Saving Mr. Banks more or less tells the true story of the creation of the film Mary Poppins. Emma Thompson plays P.L. Travers, who wrote the Mary Poppins books. Tom Hanks plays Walt Disney, who wants to take those rights for those books and turn it into the film that you and I, everybody eventually knows. P.L. Travers also went through a lot when she was a kid in terms of her father, which in many ways watching the film is what the Mr. Banks of the book is based on, her experiences with her father and that divide between the two. But when she's also very much stuck in her ways. Things need to be this way and that way. She's very abrasive. She's nasty to people. I don't think she realizes she's being nasty, but she absolutely is. You get that sense from the very first moment she meets Paul Giamatti, who is probably the nicest man in the whole world, especially in that movie. And she just cuts him off and insults him. And she sort of knows she's doing it, but she can't stop herself. And he just lets it slide because he's sweet. But the whole movie is just she's flown out to LA and she goes to the Disney studios to assist with the creation of the Mary Poppins movie. Because she says, you can make it, but I have to be there to say what you can and cannot do. And all the stuff that we remember from Mary Poppins, the music, the singing, the animation, the levitativity of it, she was absolutely against. And she fought tooth and nail against it. And Tom Hanks is very good as Disney because he portrays him in the way that Disney probably is. And we all see Disney as the godfather of magic and wonder. But he was also kind of an asshole. We all know that. We know about his beliefs and opinions and racism. It's all there. The fact that we all could believe that he is frozen under Disneyland says a lot about his legacy and who he was as a person. So Tom Hanks' Disney, he does that perfectly. He seems friendly and welcoming and obliging to P.L. Travers' needs, but at the end of the day, he's Walt Disney. He gets what he wants regardless of what anyone else says. If I want music and singing and dancing in Mary Poppins, I'm going to get it. I'm going to make you think that I'm not going to, or I'm listening to what you're saying, but at the end of the day, I'm Walt motherfucking Disney, and I am nothing you can do about it. But the movie itself, it's less about that and more Travers learning to embrace her childhood and accept what happened to her father and all of that, allowing to let people in, allowing to be kinder to people. And at the end of the day, it's just a fun little glimpse into Hollywood itself, into Disney, the Disney productions, the Disney studios, and what went into making one of the most beloved films of all time. And then you go back and watch Mary Poppins after seeing this film, and you look at it in a different light, because the movie itself is not what P.L. Travers wanted. It is not at all what she signed on for. She was manipulated in a way for it to come out. So it adds a bit of extra layer to it. You can still enjoy Mary Poppins by all means. And at the end of the day, Travers let it come out and she gets the royalties and the money. But it showcases more Disney, who he was, his business suave, his strategies of getting what he wanted when he wanted. And you get to see Emma Thompson just acting her heart out as this poor, very closed off, aggressive woman who is able, at least through this experience, to let some people in, to let some things go. It's very sweet, it's interesting, it's exciting, it's got Disney on it, so unfortunately, it's my Achilles heel, and it's here at number 2. Alright, before we get to our number 1, we are of course going to fire off some honourable mentions because there are some good ones here, but we'll go through them quickly because the episode, of course, is running long. The incredible Burt Wonderstone, Steve Carell and Jim Carrey are warring magicians. It's funny as hell. Dragon Ball Z, Battle of Gods, the return of Dragon Ball Z after a very long absence from the anime. It's a great film. Love Dragon Ball Z, so of course, love it. Star Trek Into Darkness. It may not be the most Star Trekky film, but again, the crew as Kirk and Spock and everybody, they're all great. And Benedict Cumberbatch is a mesmerizing villain. The Great Gatsby. Baz Luhrmann adapts that book that everyone had to read in school into a movie in true Baz Luhrmann style. It looks incredible and DiCaprio is great in it. Fast and Furious 6. I love the Fast and Furious franchise because it's just good schlocky fun. And this really started to embrace what they established in Fast 5, which is just big over-the-top action spectacles with very, very good characters that are banding together as a family. The Hangover Part 3. I really like this one. People may not, but I think it's brave what they did in terms of pulling away from the Hangover formula and essentially doing a crime film, which was very interesting to watch. Monsters University, a fun little prequel to Monsters, Inc. Wonderful because Mike and Sully are probably the second best duo in Pixar history. Despicable Me 2, Gru and the minions and the girls who are hired to take down a villain by the villain agency. It's a wild film, but it's a lot of fun. The Lone Ranger. I like The Lone Ranger because it reminds me whole much of Pirates of the Caribbean style. It's a very big epic thing. I don't really care about Johnny Depp in it, but I really, really love that final action piece with the Lone Ranger theme blaring. Rush, a fun film with Chris Hemsworth and Daniel Bruhl as competing Formula One race car drivers. And Las Vegas, a very wonderful, sweet little film about 4 old men, Robert De Niro, Michael Douglas, Morgan Freeman, and Kevin Kline, in the twilight years of their life, go to Vegas for a friend's bachelor party and just have a good time. It's a great film, and I love it. But beside all these honourable mentions, besides the other 9 films that made the list, nothing was going to knock this one off, even after rewatching a few of them. It is the movie Prisoners, directed by Denis Villeneuve and starring Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. Prisoners is a bit like 12 Years a Slave. It's a hard watch because it is very intense subject matter. Basically, Hugh Jackman plays the father of a little girl. Her and her best friend, who is also a little girl, are abducted. They disappear. Jake Gyllenhaal is the police officer that is assigned to locate the girls. Pretty much early on in the film, everybody figures out that Paul Dano is involved in the abduction one way or another. This creepy guy in his trailer. But no one has the evidence to convict him of anything. The clues dry up. No one really knows what to do. Everyone sort of hits a brick wall in terms of what they can and cannot do looking for these girls. So Hugh Jackman becomes a prisoner to his own rage and his own desperation to find his daughter, that he crosses many lines, the way he approaches Paul Dano and all that, which is horrifying to watch. The brutality, the pure raw energy of the emotion of his despair and his need to do something. At the same time, Jake Gyllenhaal, he's just trying to solve the case, but he's very world weary as well. He's a bit overwhelmed with the emotions around him because he doesn't really want to get too attached to anything. He's just trying to work the case. But Hugh Jackman is his own worst enemy. He keeps getting in the way. The clues are all there to point you in the right direction, to know exactly who took these girls, where they are, and why. But the way that these two characters with very different personalities coincide with each other, contrast with each other, get in each other's way, eventually leading to a very open-ended conclusion as to who gets out alive, who becomes the prisoner of their own personality. All that stuff Prisoners is a very huge metaphor for this film. It's a longish film, but again, it is very well directed by Denis Villeneuve. He knows how to present a scene, how to lay out a landscape, how to write dialogue for characters to just hold scenes where they just have conversations with each other. It is engaging, it is gripping. You want to know what happened to these girls, you want to know where they are, you want to find them. You want to stop Hugh Jackman from going too far, but you understand where he is as a person and that rate. Like, if you yourself lost your children, what would you do? It's just a mesmerizing film, and it sticks with you. I can rewatch the film quite a few times, and though it is a very intense subject, it is just a wonderful watch, an intense example of film, and Denis Villeneuve as a director. I love it, absolutely. Possibly my favorite Denis Villeneuve film. I'll let you know when I finally see Dune, when that comes out this year. But doesn't matter if a film's about Disney and Mary Poppins. It doesn't matter if it's Martin Scorsese telling DiCaprio to act up a storm. It doesn't matter if Joaquin Phoenix is giving us a look into his soul. It's this film. It's Prisoners. It's Hugh Jackman falling into the despair and rage that makes this film the best film of 2013, in my opinion. All right, thank you very much for listening. We will wrap it up. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've been reminded of some good films from 2013. But again, if you're mad, I don't care. Make your own list. This is my list, and those are my films. I will be back in the future. I don't know for what yet, but I will figure it out before I release something, that's for sure. But until then, thank you for listening to me. As always, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope you've enjoyed my top 10 movies of 2013. Until next time, you've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.